Welcome everyone, good evening. What a pleasure to see you, but you're not seeing me. I'm here, but I'm not, okay, officially. Bill was supposed to be here, but he was not feeling, was coming down with a cold, so here I am in his big shoes, introducing the speaker of tonight. Well, let me say how honored and happy I am to have Paolo Di Paolo here tonight at Sito Nol. It's a real honor for our program, our Italian Studies program, for our Alberto Italian Institute, and for the university. Paolo Di Paolo is one of the most eminent contemporary writers in Italy. He's the author of many award-winning novels, among which Lontano, dagli occhi, which won in 2019 the Premio Viareggio-Rèpaci. He is a writer of essays, essay books, plays, and it was a finalist several times for the most prestigious literary award in Italy, the Strega Award. And that was for his last novel, Romanzo senza umani, from 2024, which I read and loved, by the way. He's not only an award-winning writer, he's a journalist. He writes for two of the most prestigious and well-known papers. One is La Repubblica, which is my daily paper, the one that I read every morning, and L'Espresso, which is a weekly magazine about international events and international issues. On top of this, I don't know how he finds the time to do all these things, but on top of this, he's the host of a wonderful radio program for Rai 3. It's the main broadcasting channel in Italy, and Rai 3 specifically on cultural issues. And he's the host of a weekly program called La Lingua Batte, and is a program dedicated to Italian language and how the Italian language has, different aspects of the Italian language: historical, linguistic, cultural. He invites musicians to talk about the language of their songs, a specialist in the history of the language, professors, teachers from school, students. And yesterday, at the Italian Cultural Institute of New York, I had the honor and the privilege of being one of the speakers for one episode of La Lingua Batte being recorded in New York. So there were different speakers talking about the different aspects of Italian speaking in this country. It was fascinating. It was recorded an hour and a half, and which will be broadcasted on national radio in Italy on November 6th. In case you're in Italy, turn on your radio at 8:30 in the evening on November 6th. Otherwise, you can find it on podcast on the internet. Tonight, Paolo Di Paolo will be engaged with our own great visiting scholar, Matteo Brera, who has organized this whole event. So we are very thankful to Matteo for bringing us Paolo Di Paolo. And they will talk about Paolo Di Paolo, one of Paolo Di Paolo's specific books. I left my copy. Can I just get it for a second? Just for a second. I left mine on the table. And tonight there will be a conversation between the two about this book that came out in Italy. Paolo Di Paolo, Rimembri, ancora, Perché, amare, grandi, le poesie studiate a scuola, that came out in 2024. Why to love poetry as adults, but poetry that we learned in school as children? I don't know if you were asked to memorize poems in school and whether you still think about those poems here and there, but that's going to be the conversation here. Why learn by heart poetry, and how do we remember those poems as adults? Well, we'll hear a lot about this, but please join me in welcoming our speaker tonight, Paolo Di Paolo, all the way from Rome for New York and Seton Hall. This is a real treat for us. Thank you so much for being here. And as usual, after the talk, there will be a few minutes of Q&A if you have comments, and I hope so. And then we have a little treat as well with some of our students who will be engaged in this presentation. I'm very proud of them and very happy to see students here with us too tonight. Thank you. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Gabriella. Have it now. Ce l'ho. Tieni.
È mio questo.
È tuo? Vabbè.
It's mine.
I'm generous. Okay, thank you, Gabriella, for the introduction. Thank you to Paolo for being here tonight, for having agreed to visit us and to make Seton Hall, in a way, the center of a rather important couple of events during Italian-American Month and during the the yearly week of Italian language in the world, which we contributed to celebrate last night, as Gabriella just said, with very successful, I would say, with a full house at the Italian Cultural Institute, with an important recording of a special episode of La Lingua Batte. Paolo and I met a few years ago, 10 years ago, roughly. It's almost the decennale of our first encounter in Utrecht in the Netherlands, where he had just published, 2 years earlier, I think, or 2 or 3 years earlier, Mandami Tanta Vita, the novel on Piero Gobetti, whose centennial is coming up next year, right? On Piero Gobetti, and it was the novel that gave him fame, we can say. I mean, although Paolo has worked quite extensively on literature in general, he also published, we were talking about this a short while ago, a Divina Commedia, a version of the Divina Commedia, the whole of it, or just Inferno, or the whole of it, so an incredible work of adaptation for children. Yeah. So you can imagine what type of polymath of a writer and translator and adaptator Paolo Di Paolo is. And tonight we will be talking about a book about essentially literary memory. Gabriella said quite rightly, we will be having some students participating, joining in the discussion, but we'd very much like to make this some sort of an interactive evening, because, well, we have different generations here tonight, and most definitely, I think, a different approach to literary memory, to poetry in particular, or to prose that we learned in school, and the ways in which we learned poetry in school. We also come from different learning environments. I mean, I studied, in Italy. I studied in the UK. I studied in the Netherlands for a while, and then I worked, in the UK, in the Netherlands, and in Canada, and here in the US. So I have, we can have a broad spectrum of materials for discussion tonight. So we'd very much like to involve the public as well. So you're welcome to join in, or if you don't, we will proceed to an interrogazione a tappeto, okay, as we used to do in I don't know if they do it still in Italian schools, but we'll be moving from that. So Paolo, over to you.
The first question is.
Yeah, the first question is.
That man.
That man
Is angry, or is indignant, or is
angry or hungry?
Bored? Angry.
Okay. Arrabbiato.
I think so.
Sì.
I don't know.
Okay.
According to you?
According to me, it could be hungry as well.
Hungry.
It could be hungry as well. So, where's my food?
Yeah, hungry.
Where's my food? I mean, it could be that. He's desperate. He's desperate. Yeah.
Who is?
Desperate.
Desperate.
And who's the guy? Most importantly, who's the guy?
Melancholic.
Melancholic. Oh.
Who is?
Who is he? Chi è? Sì, tu zitta, tu zitta. Yeah. Who's the guy? Anyone? You can... No, ha suggerito. Gabriella ha suggerito. Who's the guy? No idea? You can guess if you like. He's an important literary critic.
Literary critic.
An American literary critic, well, probably the leading literary critic, at least editorially speaking, of the last few years. Chi?
Harold?
HB?
His name is Harold. Harold.
Ah, that's too easy.
No, not easy.
No.
Harold Bloom.
Harold Bloom. Harold Bloom. Shakespearean critic, not only. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
about this man, I have to say that one of his book, one of the last book, I think the last, Possessed by Memory, is interesting, respect this argument, this theme, because he tried to say his relationship with poems, with poetry, during time. The first reading, the first lecture of a poem, and the last during time. The stratification of readings is interesting, I think, because there is the first impression of a poem, of a poetry, and we don't understand all. The second reading, the third reading, and so we come at the last reading, and we comprehend, we understand a detail, a word. I think the freshness of last reading is very important, because possessed by memory means that we have a stratified memory, the possibility to find in ourselves a new perspective, a new meaning, a new sense. And so when I try to comprehend, to understand poems or poetry, I try to, come si può dire, scavare, no? Devo provare a...
To dig deeper.
To grab the meaning,
it's almost to apprehend the meaning that is always escaping, in a way, because the meaning of poetry, I believe, it's not something always immediate, and I think this links quite well with this kind of, Bloom talks about a layered reading over time. Of course, he's a literary critic, and like, a man of letters like Paolo is, you have to think about, these people. I put myself in this because, I've been reading poetry for most of my life. I graduated in metrics, Italian metricology. So, it's the count of syllables, basically. You can imagine how boring that is, but most importantly, how, layered a reading of that type is. How many times you read poetry. And it's not something that everybody does. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a continuous reading, It's not the quantity of the number of readings that you give to a poem. It's a reading anew of a poem that you've already read before. And this is my experience of poetry. Now I want to know what Paolo thinks about it. Every single time you read a poem, for the way poetry is and for what poetry is intrinsically, you always discover something new, and that means that something has escaped you before. That's why I thought about apprehending. It's like kind of trying to follow in the footsteps, or following the traces of a meaning that is continuously escaping. That's for a critic, of course, that's the reason why we read and reread poetry. And now to the writer, why do you do that? Is it the same for you, or is there anything more? And then would like to know probably from the public.
We ask to the public this.
No, you first answer. You answer first. Don't try to elude my question.
But I think it's.
So do you need? Do you want to? I mean, are you trying to find more of more meaning into what you read, or is just
any time is different. Any reading is different.
Right.
When I was child, I understand only the sound, the rhythm, the music,
Right.
for example. In the second reading, I try to have a perspective about the meaning, a part of the meaning, of the whole meaning. And so the third is different. And I think that even if we don't grab the sense, this is a door we open.
Right. So we create a possibility.
What we don't know, what we don't recognize, what we don't comprehend is, above all, in poetry, a door that we open.
So is this the desire?
The door of meaning, the door of sense.
Right.
But there is not a unique sense, only sense, I think.
So is this I don't know if it's a necessity for a writer, for a critic probably it is a necessity, but for a writer as well. Is this necessity of opening a new door, or opening new doors that brought you to write this book then?
Yeah.
Is this desire or?
Because I was forced, for example, during my school years to memorize poetry,
Right.
poems. And I didn't understand. For example, ei fussi come immobile, dato il mortal sospiro, stette la spoglia immemore, orba di tanto spiro, così percossa e attonita la terra al nunzio sta, muta, pensando all'ultima ora dell'uomo fatale. I didn't understand anything for the first time, in the first time. The second time, I see that is a compressed political novel, this poem. A little novel in verses about the political glory.
Right.
Napoleon, Manzoni is the author of Promessi Sposi, in English, The Betrothed. And he wrote a poem about the death of Napoleon. So he tried to describe the life of Napoleon in a novel in verses. Ei fu, his death. Yeah. So I memorized without knowing the profound, the deep sense of the poem, and so I have the possibility to find the meaning in any reading.
And re-explore the text as well, because you used a very clear example of what is misteaching of Italian poetry in high school or in elementary school, because there are teachers who teach it exactly as you read it the first as you recited it the first time you did recite it, without any pauses. Ei fu siccome immobile, there's a full stop after the first two syllables. Ei fu, that very short sentence, he was, full stop. He dead. So that's immediately a poem about the death of Napoleon, the end of an era, the end of a political era in Europe. Napoleon is dead. That is the meaning, in two syllables. Ei fu. If you read it, ei fu siccome immobile, you lose it. You lose ei fu, siccome immobile. And then the line breaks, and it goes down, and the narration continues. And then you have the explanation of how important it is for the poet to have put those two syllables at the very beginning, located to the left-hand side of the line, with a full stop next to it. Words are way more heavy when it comes to meaning, especially in poetry, compared to prose and the spoken, conversation, and so.
And this poem, it is like a prayer, not religious prayer. It is an essay on politics, on political glory, for example. And it is meditation about the end of all things. Uh,
Of an era.
yeah, but all
All
human
the-
things,
Yeah.
the end of everything.
In that case, yeah.
Because there is a verse that says, one moment.
La memoria.
Non me la ricordo più, I don't remember in this moment. Dov'è silenzio e tenebre, ora you translate this, dov'è silenzio e tenebre,
Where is
la
silence
gloria
and-
che passò.
Okay, where is silence and darkness, the glory that had passed, that passed. Okay.
That is oblivion.
The oblivion, yeah, yeah, we could translate
The
that.
ultimate oblivion,
Yeah, the ultimate,
the end
the
of
end, yeah.
all things.
La gloria che passò, la gloria che è finita. It
For
passed
us, for
forever.
Napoleon, for everyone.
For everyone.
Yeah.
For everyone. So that's the importance of how many of you had to learn anything by heart? Poetry. Let's stick to poetry by heart in high school. Hands up.
Yeah, for example?
Yeah, for you for tonight. No.
No.
No,
Exactly.
joking.
Exactly.
But yeah, but we have an intergenerational kind of dialogue. You know, the possibility of an intergeneration kind of dialogue. I mean, you know, there is someone there who, you know, to the left, to the youth side of things, and to the, you know, not so young, you know, side of things. And I had to, you had to as well. So, you know, we're all in this together, basically. What did you have to? What poem?
Yeah.
Did you have to? So you don't remember the poem, but you didn't know. So anyone else who does remember something? Cosa hai imparato? Tu hai alzato la mano. You said you learned something by heart, right? More in depth. What poem of Shakespeare? What of Shakespeare did you have to learn by heart or to remember by heart? Like a sonnet, a passage from a tragedy, a
Romeo
comedy.
and Juliet.
Say
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet. Macbeth.
Macbeth.
And any sonnets? Any short poems? No. So the sonnets that was my personal interest, but you know, the sonnets are already kind of. How long was the text that you had to memorize? Very long. The whole of it.
Wow.
Are you an actress? I mean, do you have to learn it by heart or it was just a school thing? Who's the teacher? Who's that teacher? Because it's all right. Oh. So. No. We still can. I mean, you know, we still, you know. So that's. But you know, let's get back to the possessed by memory kind of thing. So but it's about this, the freshness of the last reading.
Yeah.
And the staleness, in a way, of the first reading, of the older, the previous readings. One thing that always fascinated me that I can still actually remember, you know, several of the poems that I was made to, you know, to learn by heart in I don't know what grade it is, a scuola elementare, but, you know, when I was 6. I mean, one of the very first things that, you know, a school teacher asked of me was to, you know, to learn something by heart. And there were several lines. I mean, Il passero solitario, a Silvia. I mean, at least the first portions of the text, you know, the descriptive portions of Leopardi's text. Carducci, for instance. So this is it's about freshness. The fact that it doesn't stick in your mind, you know, to me, it suggests that it will. I mean, this is why there are literary critics, I suppose. I mean, you have to kind of interiorize what you read, and you know, reading by heart, you know, in a way, which is a mechanic kind of repetition. I mean, you learn by heart by mechanically repeating something, makes you, in a way, introject, you know, very, you know, in depth, one way or another. Maybe because you like the poem, or because your brain gets trained as a muscle, like a muscle, to you know, to interiorize the type of poetry.
I love this expression. This expression in English, by heart.
Yeah.
Because it's like a store in ourselves an archive, emotional archive in ourselves. By heart, it's like to have in the deepest part of us the sense or the brightness of sense, tenuous brightness of sense, come se lampeggiasse.
As if lampeggiare.
Bello lampeggiare, it's
Lampeggiare,
poetic.
To flash.
Yeah, like the light in The Great Gatsby. The green light.
The green light.
In
The
Great
green
Gatsby.
light. Yeah, there's a shift there. You know, if you talk about being possessed by memory, and this again is the act of memorizing, which is mechanical somehow, and the learning by heart. I mean, there's a significant shift in meaning, in my opinion. What do you think? You were about to say something.
Oh, I was going to say, it teaches you, when you memorize, composure and self-confidence. Because now, understanding that I'm older, where I went to high school, you simply had to stand up in front of the class and show you could memorize. It didn't mean that you understood what you just memorized.
Right.
You memorized it, and it taught you to be able to verbalize, self-composure, different things. The one poem that I do remember, see?
Yeah.
About the tree, I think that I shall never see. Remember? Joyce Kilmer about
Joyce
the
Kilmer.
tree?
There was something about a tree in Joyce Kilmer. I mean, we have, a wedge of the. Oh, it still stays with you.
And the road not taken, or the path not taken.
There you go, it's coming up. It's Robert Frost. Oh, yeah.
So that's, we just had to stand up and memorize.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, it has to do with the way of teaching that's probably past us in a way, right? Where that also taught you to kind of withstand some kind of pressure as well, because you had to do it in front of an audience, which is something that, it's kind of a forgery of a character that you have to endure, in that. I mean, this is probably too dramatic, but still, it was a way of kind of instilling discipline, self-discipline, the ability to, he taught you the ability to really, tell people something that you've learned and to, confront in a way your audience, people who, I mean, your community in that case in school, but not only, was something that was supposed to teach you to do that, really to withstand some pressure. No, yeah.
It was a classroom of high school
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, of course, yeah,
Cutting up, making jokes.
yeah. And then all of a sudden the teacher would call you up and say, okay, recite that poem of Robert Frost, because you were maybe too noisy or,
Catholic high school.
Catholic high school, that was, you stand up.
Yes.
Yeah, Pianto Antico by Carducci. that was the way. And that's probably why you don't interiorize that so much, because it was a disciplinarian kind of thing yeah. So this and this is the difference between being possessed by memory in a way, which is again a mechanic act,
Yeah.
and learning it by heart. I think the shift in meaning it's great. And we were talking about this earlier. Since it's Italian American month, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Leonard Covello. Leonard Covello was the first teacher of an Italian school, la scuola degli Italo-Americani, the school of Italian Americans in East Harlem, okay, in the 20s. Leonard Covello establishes a school for Italian American kids in what used to be an Italian area of New York, and would soon become an incredibly ethnic, diverse area of town with the Puerto Ricans, and the Puerto Ricans, slowly took over, and the Italians moved around and out of the neighborhood. But it was a very important experiment, which Covello kind of rounded off with the publication of an essay on education, which was his own idea of education, and the title of that essay is "The Heart is the Teacher." And the importance, according to Covello, of, for instance, language teaching was also to preserve the own memory of, because it was important for an Italian American to learn the new language in order to integrate, to Americanize to some point, when Americanization was actually a thing. I mean, it's coming back in a way, it seems like, but the idea was to put the focus on the heart, on the kind of, and it was an affectionate way to learn, learn through affection that you had to your own linguistic, but not only linguistic memory, also your cultural memory, in order to learn, how to adapt to the new country which went through the learning of a new language. So the heart is the teacher, and I think it's on the very same line of that, because there's this double dimension. And probably learning by heart, and learning by heart also means to understand probably the meaning of a text more in depth. It's what brings you to this type of.
There is an expression by Philip Roth, a writer of Newark, that is professor of desire, teacher of desire. He's an artist, he's a wizard, a magician, he's a finder, he's a professor of desire that have to determinate the desire of knowledge, of discovering himself, herself in the student. And I think it's there is a possibility to find in ourselves the magician, the artist, through comprehension of poetry, of art. We are artists of ourselves, and so the teacher is who have to discover in you, in me, this possibility, this quality.
Yeah, in order to do that, you need not only the brain but also the heart. Clearly. Yeah.
I have a question. When you write poetry and then when you write your novel, what is the distinct difference between the two? Because in my opinion, when you write a novel, you just think of a story or a scenario and you develop it. But when you write poetry, you dig into your soul and your spirit. And to me, the part about memory, it's the relationship that you're making with your life and how you want to put it into words in poetry. To me, poetry is the most beautiful form of self-expression. So do you think there's a difference between you when you write poems and you when you write your novel?
But I don't write poems. I didn't write poems because I have fear of writing poems. I always wrote prose, narrative prose, but I tried to make poetic, lyric, like an elegy, the prose. I think there is a possibility to transform, to define the space of the prose like a poetry, but without lines, without verses, through images, through adjectives, through the most precise form of language. I think there are writers in prose, authors of novels that are similar to poets. But the poetry has a specific quality. There is the writing and the silence. The writing and the silence. The silence is the white space. And you have to discover the meaning not only of the words, but of the silence of the white space. È la vera scommessa della poesia, cioè il fatto...
True gamble, the challenge. It's a
A
challenge.
real challenge,
It's
yes.
a gamble, actually. It's gambling with meaning. It's gambling with yourself as well. To learn to gamble is commettere. No? When you gamble with yourself, you gamble with your own the limits of your interpretation as well. I don't know. Yeah.
Ma sì, in questo caso anche the limit of my capacity.
Yeah, of course, it's a gamble with your.
I think I can't write poetry. I decide this. I don't write poetry, but I have read for a long time poems. I absorbed the strongness of poetic words, ma aggiungo in italiano perché è più complicato, che esiste una prosa elegiaca, direi proprio, lirica, che mi ha sempre affascinato. E c'è un'immagine, dico molto brevemente così tu poi magari traduci, di un autore sconosciuto negli Stati Uniti, che forse si conosce un po' il cognome perché il figlio è diventato uno dei più importanti registi italiani del secondo Novecento, Bertolucci. Aveva un padre che era un poeta e dice che la prosa e la poesia possono lavarsi reciprocamente come se fossero amanti. E questo mi è sempre sembrato molto sensuale, ma è anche una possibilità dell'espressione narrativa.
This is very difficult to translate. You realize it's
Quello io
impossible.
non
So
lo
we're talking
dico in
about
inglese.
Attilio Bertolucci.
Attilio
We're talking
Bertolucci.
about Attilio Bertolucci. Attilio Bertolucci was Bernardo Bertolucci's father. Okay, well, Bernardo Bertolucci's father, who said, who gave an interpretation of poetry. Ridimela.
Sì, no, la possibilità di scrivere in prosa,
Possibility of writing
ma
in
facendo
prose.
in modo che poesia e prosa si lavino.
Okay, so the idea is that it exists a poetic prose, okay, sort of poetic prose, and a lyrical type of prose that he describes, that Bertolucci describes in a very sensual way, like two lovers who clean themselves up, who shower together in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this kind of sensual, sexual image of two lovers having bathing together, okay, and interacting in a very sensual way. So in a way, it's a type of a compenetration of prose and poetry to produce this type of textual typology. That is something that definitely exists. I mean, poetic prose is a genre. I mean, it's an expressive way of. Yeah.
I like this line. Poetry is sound as well. Librettos, opera.
Yeah.
Are written in a language that is prose and poetry together. Could you tell us a little more? I mean, could you give us your thoughts on the musicality of poetry that goes beyond words? We can go and listen. I don't speak German. I can go and see a Mozart opera in German, not understanding anything they say, and yet I still take pleasure. I still get something out of the sound of the language.
It's music. So I can read a poem in another language and I feel something. I grab some rhythm, some quality of expression without knowing that language, without me grabbing the deep meaning of the words. I think there is space formed by sounds. We feel the sounds of, for example, la nebbia agli irticolli. Ora, this sound, it is a music. It is like a music. Potremmo vedere Ungaretti, no? Prima di
Yeah, absolutely.
we have an example.
Yeah, that's
of this.
There's a few things, but
Yeah.
all right. Let's see. This is Gianni Rodari, Ungaretti.
Yes.
Let's see.
This is one of most
Let's see if it
famous
works. Let's see if it
popular
works.
poets in the second part of 20th century in Italy,
Aspetta, vediamo se riesco a
and
tradurre,
he
perché non va.
became popular by television because he read his poems on TV in during
Should
50
send this to-
years.
Okay.
Yeah, 50s.
Let's forget the advert. This is not part of the presentation.
No, perché mi sa che...
All right. Let's see. Oh. There should be technical support, please. Help! 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 Corey, help! It's a YouTube video. Let's see. Probably there's a. I don't know what's.
So I think because we're projecting the PowerPoint,
Right.
probably, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to not project that, let's see. So if we stop presenting,
This is tough. The presentation is tough. I think. Ecco.
hey, Jorge, there we go. And
And
so it's not in the PowerPoint. So if
No,
we
it's outside.
so if
of
we
the
just pop
PowerPoint.
out from there, then you should be able to see it. I don't know about making it full screen. I don't see that option here. Oh, there it is.
There you go.
Okay, so whenever you're ready, that should
Yeah.
work.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Ok, vai. Procedi pure, Paolo.
Okay. No, we
So,
will have here this.
Presenta un po' magari Ungari, due parole
detto,
su
ho detto.
Ungaretti.
Yeah,
Allora,
he became popular by television and like
I
this
fiumi.
performances.
Mi tengo a quest'albero mutilato, abbandonato in questa dolina che ha il languore di un circo prima o dopo lo spettacolo e guardo il passaggio quieto delle nuvole sulla luna. Stamani mi sono disteso in un'urna d'acqua e come una reliquia ho riposato. L'isonzo scorrendo mi levigava come un suo sasso. Ho tirato su le mie quattro ossa e me ne sono andato come un acrobata sull'acqua. Mi sono accoccolato vicino ai miei panni sudici di guerra e come un beduino mi sono chinata a ricevere il sole. Questo è l'isonzo e qui meglio mi sono riconosciuto una docile fibra dell'universo. Il mio supplizio è quando non mi credo in armonia, ma quelle occulte mani che mi intridono, mi regalano la rara felicità.
It's like a cry, a roar. It's a sound. And it's not important to comprehend, to have the meaning, the sense, because we feel something about his reading. He was a soldier during the First World War, and he tried to write a liquid autobiography, because he tells about the rivers of his life. And any river is a season of his life. But Ungaretti read like this performance with body, with voice, with cry, with roaring voice.
with heart.
With heart.
With heart,
By
that's
heart.
for sure. I mean, it's heart and voice, and here are together. We're talking about music and words as well. I mean, you've got both here. There was a debate as well as far as opera librettos go triggered by Salieri's opera Prima la musica e poi le parole, first the music and then words. And that triggered a massive debate all over Europe, all over the world, whether the words of opera librettos were written before music or vice versa. But after all, do we really care about it? I mean, is it that important to establish what came first? Because in the end, what matters is the poetic performance, in a way, right?
You wrote, I think, the most brief
Soldati.
but also mattina,
Mattina. Yeah.
2 lines.
2 lines.
Mi illumino
D'immenso.
d'immenso. How can we translate mi illumino d'immenso?
I like, well, because it's I light myself up, in a way. What did you say? Sorry, Biana? No, su, dai. Now you said it already, so. I light myself up. Yeah, I light myself
I light
up.
myself up.
Yeah, I lit myself up, it's somehow, with of infinity. So it's just 2 lines, and there's a body of criticism about that poetry, the short poem that is incredible. So it's about, talking about performance. Do we have a performance before we? Because I heard someone told me.
Torniamo indietro su.
Ma adesso non ce la faccio più, stai bloccato. No, stai bloccato. Aspetta, continua. Yeah. Sì, no, sì. Abbiamo finito. Applauso. Aspetta, ci siamo. Is this the poem?
Yeah.
Prego.
The mist pours steep slopes rises, as the rain comes trickling down, and under northern breezes roars and whitens the sea. But along the city streets, from fine fermenting bins, the savory smell of wines permeates the soul with glee.
Spinning over logs alight, skewers ablaze and sizzling. The hunter pauses whistling, beside the threshold to see. Among the reddish hazes, flocking birds as black as night, indistinct as thoughts in flight, towards the setting sun they flit. Piano Italian. La nebbia all'infuori, piogginando sale e sotto il mastrale, vola e biancheggia il mare. Ma ferrovie del borgo, d'angoli, del vino, da scorporto di vino, l'anime a raya. Gira su cerchi assesi, lo schiero scoppiettando, dal cacciator fischiando, sul riuscito a rimirare. Tra le nostre nubi, stormi d'uccelli neri, come soli pensieri, il vespero migra.
It is a poem about a cloudy day in November, maybe in Tuscany. The sea is hungry. The sea is in a tempest, and there is nebbia. Come si dice? Fog. There is fog, and it's raining. La nebbia agli irticolli. There are in this poem the rhymes colli, sale, maestrale. Perché la nebbia agli irticolli piogginando sale, maestrale, tini, vini, scoppiettando, fischiando, neri pensieri, rimirar, migrar. So the rhymes are very important in this.
Yeah, and you have the truncated words, parola tronca, without the final vowel, migrar, rimirar, rallegrar mar. So it's kind of, it chains all the stanzas together. So you see how poetry is, can be incredibly complex, easy to read, but incredibly complex if you think about the act of writing it. So that's why Paolo chickened out and never wanted to write poetry, because it's more difficult to write poetry than to, technically speaking, write. It's incredibly more difficult.
Yeah.
It's, even though you can use poetic prose, but hear every single sound. You heard Ungaretti, how he read his poem. The emphasis he put on the sounds S, the sounds L, on the R's, which are the most unnatural sounds for men. The R's and S's are, generally speaking, the last sounds, especially R's, that are developed by a human being. When the first words that a baby, speaks, and forms in the form in a baby's mouth and throat are mama, baba, papa. I've never heard of a kid that was, whose first words was rrr. It's unnatural. It's simply unnatural. The rotated sound is one of the last ones that we articulate. So the emphasis on certain sounds is puts
like
emphasis on meaning.
A musical score, like una partitura.
A score,
Yeah.
a score. Yeah, it's like a music. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. It can be like a musical score. There's a rhythm. You can put this in music, obviously, respecting, generally speaking, respecting, the pauses and the emphasis on accents, on stresses, because this is an interesting expression as well. Accento in English is a stress. You put stress on the word, which create, and stress creates a tension. Right, so this is what poetry.
And in that era of history of literature, you need to have a technical knowledge. You don't write poetry without this technical knowledge, the metrical technique, endecasillabo, 11 syllables, settenario, 7 syllables. Yeah. So it is impossible to become a poet in that era without this knowledge. Now we have free verses, and so it's different because you have the silence, the line, the white space without this prison of, because it is a prison, this technical form, this metrical form.
Yeah. Yes.
Prison, because you are forced to close, to come si può dire, proprio
to respect in a way,
yeah.
to
I have another question, and also I invite anyone, especially students, please, where's your pen? This is, besides the technicality, poetry represents the personal, intimate dimension, but also the collective dimension.
Oh, yeah.
Poetry represents our national identity. Robert Frost, Longfellow, Emily Dickinson, you name them, of the American, and we have our own in Italian, Leopardi, Busoni, and more contemporary. There is a tension between these two dimensions of poetry. And then I'm going to ask the next question, so I'm done with my questions. Paolo, you don't write poetry, but you read poetry. Can you explain, especially to the young people, but not only, the pleasure of reading? Why read poetry? What are the rewards? And what are the challenges? Not as a critic reading poetry, not understanding the technique, but simply getting the pleasure that you get by listening to a song. Let's say.
I think that the first reason is that everyday language is poor, is not precise, is opaque, is crude, is the language of poetry is precise, is abissale, definitivo,
Final,
profound. And this is the first reason, because we have, with poetry in our life, another language, like a foreigner language, like I speak in Italian and in poetical language with myself. I have precise words to define the details of our life, of our interiority. Which words I can use to express myself without poetry. I don't have words without relation with con un lessico, con un vocabulary, different vocabulary. Because, for example, if I say love, I say nothing. If I say l'amor che muove il sole e le altre stelle, the love that moves.
The Dante's line, the final line.
I say something more precise, more. I say things that gives intensity to my feelings that have not words. My feelings have not words, I think. Poi penso, in italiano, che anche leggere la poesia, it's like a liturgy, it's like a prayer.
The act of reading poetry is like it's like a prayer. It's
Prayer,
like a liturgy.
liturgy.
It's like a liturgy,
If I have not time for read novels, for example, or newspaper, I can try to destinate a bit of time every day to read poetries. Because
therapy, it's also therapy.
like a therapy, 1 minute, 2 minutes for the possibility to express through the interiority of poet, my interiority with myself, because from silence to silence is this movement from silence to silence. My silence, his silence. And I think it's very, 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 very important, very interesting, very surprising. Rispetto invece, e questo è un po' più complicato, alla questione del rappresentare se stessi e a rappresentare tutti, credo che non sempre accada.
On the matter of poetry representing oneself and representing, well, the nation, the other and otherness as well. Yeah.
Per esempio, però, questo
that's not always the case. That might not be always the case.
Questo poeta che abbiamo alle spalle, Carducci, was a poet of nation,
il poeta
dell'Italia Unita, della patria.
Yeah.
E ha scritto molte poesie in cui ha tentato di rappresentare la collettività, soprattutto su un piano storico.
Yeah, he wrote, hundreds of poems, about tens at least of poems through which he tried to represent collectivity, an historical, a national identity on a historical plane. I mean, in the aftermath, especially in the aftermath of Italian unification.
Ma paradossalmente è riuscito a rappresentare, è un poeta molto distante dalla sensibilità contemporanea.
It's perceived as very distant as a poet.
For example, Walt Whitman, who is a contemporary, è incredibilmente più contemporaneo di Carducci.
And Carducci was the one who imported Walt Whitman. Carducci had held the chair of Italian literature at the University of Bologna, the alma mater the Bologna, the University of Bologna is, the most ancient university in the world. And he was the one who first, Carducci is incredibly, as Paolo said, rooted into, in a way, classical antiquity, in terms of what kind of meters, what kind of poetry or poetic lines he used. It was him and Pascoli was his pupil, were the poets of really classical antiquities. These people wrote in Latin as well, using iambic pentameters and other Latin meters. But Carducci recognized the modernity of Whitman to the point that was the first one to bring Whitman into the Italian, not into the Italian canon, but into Italian literature, into the Italian, kind of cultural setup by, presenting it to, to the Italian reading public, studying public more like, as, a poet of a contemporary poet, a poet of modernity.
But it's less modern than Whitman, and so when Carducci tries to represent the collectivity, is less moving than when he tries to represent the courage of his wakeness, the private life. For example, l'albero a cui tendevi la pargoletta a mano o I cipressi che a bolgari alti e schietti are two poems about his private life, and is very moving. So la rappresentazione della collettività quando diventa istituzionale è molto fredda.
Yeah, it's very cold. Carducci becomes very cold. And in general, Paolo says when the representation, poetic representation of national identity, surges to the point of being representative of a nation, it becomes incredibly cold, incredibly sterile in a way, in terms of in terms of convene any meaning, any feelings.
And the miracle of poetry is that when I write about myself, the little things of my life, and I become universal.
Become more profound, you become more...
But I can represent you and she, and so...
You become more pompous that way, and
the specific quality and truth of your private life can be universal.
You project it into, onto...
in a collectivity, in a real collectivity.
A great example of that is the first Persino Dante's comedy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Everyone could possibly relate to that at some point in life, or it's, in a
in the middle of life.
Yeah.
I found myself in
Middle-age crisis.
There is a last question.
Yeah.
There is a question?
Yeah, you have she had a question.
Yeah, I have one thing. I came in a little bit late because I worked, so I'm sorry if
No,
this
it's fine.
has been gone over. But you guys were talking about this as like a formation of national identity and the connection between a style of poetry and
No, ma capisci.
Sì. Insomma, se corrino.
No, I'm so sorry. No, okay. Well, I was thinking about that in terms of, especially in connection with the prison of structures for different types of poetry. So, do you think it's possible or genuine or valid for different national identities to sort of take from other ones? Like what I'm thinking of, and this is a little before this poet, but one of the most famous English forms of poetry is a Petrarchan sonnet, right? Which is an Italian form. That's a form from someplace else. So I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on sort of the importation of different national styles of poetry.
This is difficult. Well, there have been experiments, but I think, well, in my experience as a critic, if you think about Philip Sidney, for instance, he's a Petrarchan poet, right? He imports Petrarchan lyrics, lyrical structures into English poetry. It imports a style, not necessarily. I think a style is not enough to convey a political message or an identitarian type of message, if you know, if I'm allowed this type of expression. I think Paolo agrees with this. You know, in fact, it's all about words in the end. It's all about the meaning. Then, of course, there is a rhythm. You know, if you think of epic poetry, okay, epic poetry, that rhythm, you know, fits very well into what Ariosto or Tasso or Whitman is saying. You know, with the free verse of Whitman, you know, fits in very well with the density of meanings and the political meanings that, you know, lie below and on the surface as well, and of Whitman's poems. So I believe rhythm, again, music and words, you know, did the music come first, or the rhythm in this case, or words came first? I think, you know, it's really a compenetration. Is the two lovers bathing together, and they produce that type of identitarian thing. They become part of a canon, and of that type, that part of the canon. It could you know, help, you know, sometimes to, you know, to convey a message of that type, but I don't think it's necessary or it's paramount in doing that. I think it's both things have to. And that being said, I mean, talking about the cage of the prison of poetry, well, you can free words up from that prison, producing the type of prose that, you know, oftentimes Paolo writes himself, and being equally. I mean, Paolo is not, you know, hasn't gone as far as being, you know, becoming nationalistic in his approach to literature yet. You may, you know, when once he develops that type of beard, maybe he will also develop that type of. But you know, you can be equally nationalistic without the necessarily having the rhythm, or having a different type of rhythm that is, you know, freed. That is the result of freeing poetry up from the cage of poetry itself. So I think, again, it's poetry is complex because it's both things. So I don't think it's enough to bring the rhythm into one literary canon to obtain the result. It could help.
Yeah, and it's there is the risk of mannerism.
Mannerism, yes, absolutely.
In importing or imitating something.
Philip Sidney is a specific example of that. You know.
Let me add to this topic. You're talking of a time where poetry was considered the highest form of artistic expression. You know, Petrarch, Shakespeare with sonnet, so that was the model, and everybody had to apply them. Today we don't have that anymore.
No, it's different. It's different. Yeah, and it's true that, you know, poetry is so. I know it's so high up there that.
So some closing remarks from Paolo.
Una conclusione. Dici qualcosa. Dici qualcosa.
A piacere. No, credo che spesso bisogna proprio superare una paura della poesia. Aggiungo solo questo. In questo momento, anche tra i lettori forti, cioè tra quelli che leggono molto, in Italia per esempio, ma credo che valga anche per gli Stati Uniti, se trovi una persona che legge e gli chiedi o le chiedi, ma leggi anche poesia? È presumibile che ti dica no. E che gli ultimi rapporti che ha avuto con la poesia siano negli anni della scuola. Poi aggiungo una cosa.
Yeah. Paolo says, if you ask someone who reads, you know, is a habitual reader, and you ask that person whether they read poetry, most probably they would come back to you by saying, not really, and probably the last memory of poetry they have, of reading poetry that they have, comes from their school years.
Perché qualche volta, come nei confronti dell'arte contemporanea, mentre se io vedo un quadro di Caravaggio, sento di poterlo capire, è come se fosse una grammatica che conosco, se leggo la poesia contemporanea è come guardare l'arte contemporanea, e quindi ti viene da chiederti, ma sono io che non
It's
capisco?
about the tools you have that that allow you to understand, to understand poetry. So when it comes to literature in general, or art, modern and contemporary art, so you have an academics. Even within contemporary art, if you look at Dali, because I know. Yeah, no, yeah,
come
I was
guardare,
saying that, yeah. When you have, Paolo says, when you look at a work of art, as in poetry, you need the tools to understand the work of art. I was getting there. That's why. So you need the grammatic of kind of the grammatical tools as well to challenge poetry and its meaning, and such as contemporary art. If you look at the Caravaggio, of course, you go an academic type of drawing. There's a disegno, there's a drawing, there's a, you have a familiarity.
It's familiar.
You have a familiarity
Clear,
with
familiar.
If you look at the
Transparent.
Carracci and the Caravaggio, you see, you can tell, well, that's a great way of rendering, for instance, the human body, which is absolutely perfect, the light and all that, so it's immediately understandable. And if you understand the drawing, chances are, at least superficially, you understand the meaning of it. When it comes to contemporary art, so more abstract art, I would say, it's in the abstraction that the problem comes up for the interpretation.
Per concludere, come ho detto all'inizio, in realtà anche questo non capire è una possibilità di scoprire qualcosa. E poi, come ultima indicazione, direi che molta della poesia contemporanea è incredibilmente più trasparente, affabile, narrativa di quello che noi crediamo. Do solo un consiglio a tutti, credo che sia tradotta anche largamente in inglese perché ha vinto il premio Nobel per la letteratura qualche anno fa, è una poetessa polacca che si chiama Wisława Szymborska. Se uno ha qualche difficoltà o pregiudizio nei confronti della poesia contemporanea e legge Szymborska, si ricrederà, perché c'è una attitudine come confidenziale, calda, di una poetessa ironica e narrativa insieme. Ci può mettere in contatto con la poesia facendoci appunto superare questo pregiudizio.
So contemporary poetry, I'll try to be as succinct as I can here, because it's a very, very long and elaborate discourse. But Paolo was saying that contemporary poetry, abstract poetry, or what is perceived as being abstract poetry, and he mentioned Szymborska, it's way more affable than what we might think. It's more friendly in a way that we might think about it. And I think the message was at the beginning of what you said. Not understanding poetry immediately at first sight or at the first attempt is an opportunity to, unlock one of those doors that Paolo was talking about at the beginning, and which links all this discourse that we just had to the first. And one of the very first things that we read on the slides by Harold Bloom, the idea of this layered and continuous and repetitive reading in order to unlock the meaning of poetry, which might be obscure at first, but that's the whole idea, I believe, behind this book, which is the pleasure and the importance of reading poetry anew again. In order to unlock its meaning of whatever kind. Of course, if you're a critic, you're gonna, or a poet, or a man of letters yourself, you're gonna unlock, maybe deeper meanings. But still, rereading poetry is important. Maybe after a few years, several years from the first reading, in order to understand something more of what is your national, international canon, which may or may not be linked, but that's not really that relevant in terms of appreciation of poetry.